Kathryn Henkel and Karen Berry spoke with reporter Lauren Brandt about their journey graduating from Scottsbluff to working on the Artemis I launch.
You that one of my favorite classes in Scottsbluff Senior High School was the house wiring class. I was the only girl in that class. We went and installed ceiling fans and outlets and stuff, you know, around Scottsbluff. It was fun. I don't remember who my teacher was, but it was fun.
Yeah, that was your start. Little did you know where you were.
That was my start.
So I guess now the Artemis launch has kind of been big this whole week. We were thinking it was going to be earlier. Things happened. As far as we know, we think it's going to be Saturday. Kind of talk about your involvement in this launch, if you've like constructed anything or had to program anything.
At a launch. So I spent most of my time training people, new people to look at data for this launch. And I always describe it as the launch vehicle has a language. It's pressures and temperatures and valve positions, open and close, and how you interpret that data, you know, how the rocket speaks to you through that data. And you have to look at that data and make sure everything is really good. And we do have launch commit criteria, which we call LCCs, and we make sure all of the data is within bounds of those LCCs before launch. So leading up to the launch, it was, you know, we had to test at Stennis. We had to test the part of the vehicle at Stennis, the upper stage, or the stage, I mean. And we had to get data from Stennis, and then look at that data and make sure we understood what we were looking at. And then also along the way now we have to get data from the Cape. And one of my jobs was making sure, getting the servers and everything so that all of my guys could get the data. And even to this day, that server is used across the agency from nationwide for people to get this launch vehicle data. And also Boeing uses it too. So it's interesting to me. They also have their own server, but you know, it's interesting to me that, you know, such a small group in the propulsion department had such a big impact on the launch vehicle with the data and the individuals looking at engine data and MPS data, which stands for main propulsion systems. Main propulsion systems is just basically everything above the engine. That's the fluids. So from the tank all the way down to the engine inlet is what we call MPS.
And that data is what they're analyzing right now, this very minute, to figure out, you know, to try to review what happened with the last launch. Okay. You know, why we couldn't go forward and that kind of thing.
Okay. So when they say data, they got to look at the data. A lot of times you'll hear the manager say that you're just looking at the pressures and temperatures, all the engineering data that the launch vehicle provided us.
Yeah, it's on a graph, and the engine didn't really fail. It was just not cooling down.
Gotcha.
Like it should have been.
Okay. It's more of a safety thing, you know. I feel
absolutely. It is a safety thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I do is a little bit different. I do logistics, which is all about making sure the vehicle is completely supported during launch. So it has to do with all the background stuff. So I wrote the integrated logistics support plan for the vehicle, and it has to do with, you know, where are we going to have to replace parts? You know, what are those parts? What are the maintenance items? What's the maintenance required to make sure the vehicle stays in a launch condition? You know, if we have to, when we bring all things together to integrate it, do we need storage? Do we need ground support equipment? And I just I transferred to the engine group to support their engine operations a few years ago. I was part of the logistics team, and then the engine operations group brought me over because they wanted me to do that same thing for the engines. So I've been dealing with ground support equipment for the engines. And so that has, you know, there's lots of things that we have to do to keep everything safe. So one of the things for ground support equipment is if somebody wants to bring in a welder, like to the Cape, I have to review it and make sure that, does it have any electronics? Can it be hacked into? Does it need a safety assessment? What software is it using? Does it meet the class 1 div 2 criteria, which means it's that's the kind of criteria that we use on the vehicle itself to make sure that, like, when you plug into connectors, it doesn't spark. So there's a special connector on that because there's always some vapor in the air around the vehicle, and so we don't want anything to ignite. So there's different things that I do for ground support equipment, package handling, shipping and transportation, to make sure everything can get to the site that's needed. So I'm kind of more of a back end person to help with the development and to keep the processes going if we do have a failure. And that's one of the reasons I'm on console. It's like, if we do have a failure, can I get them, make sure the equipment they need can get to them to repair, to do the repair.
Okay. Oh, wow. So for people to understand, when they've launched and then the engines fall off eventually in the atmosphere and land in the ocean or whatever, are you responsible in helping find those and getting them back, or you just kind of making sure they function?
No, we're not going to reuse them. They're not being reused.
Okay.
They're expendable.
Sounds good.
We used on the shuttle, they were reused, right? On the shuttle, we did go get them. We're not doing that with this vehicle.
Okay. Good to know.
And if they're actually, the engines that we have right now are the shuttle engines. We're reusing them because we had about 16 engines that NASA had purchased that we never used for shuttle. And so we're using them for this spacecraft, but we're eventually going to make new engines, and we're in the process of doing that right now. We're going to make new engines, and they're going to kind of remove some of the redundant components that we no longer need because they're no longer reusable.
So they did upgrade the engines. So I will say they're not the identical engines. They have a different controller, right? Instead of, we have modern technology computers, right? So we don't need this huge controller. But yeah, it's different. It operates a little bit differently, much colder on the inlet, right? Much higher pressure. It's just a different, I will say, updated engine.
Okay.
With the basis of the space shuttle main engine, yeah.
Well, I think that is what I needed, and I really appreciate your time, taking the time to kind of talk about this process of what happened and hopefully what will happen on Saturday. And it's always great to kind of touch base with some alumni of Scottsbluff area and highlight where you've been since you last left. So I wish you all the best.
My coworker sent me the magic 8-ball prophecy. It says all things looking good. So
fingers crossed that holds true then.